Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. Boys and girls, I'm ready to get started right quick here because we got some late queue posts. And if you want to get these today, I got to do it now. 38:35, 42 minutes after the hour of 10. We get a Washington Examiner link, and I highlighted a couple parts for you here. Confidential banking records related to Hunter Biden in Senate hands. This is from the 6th. The U.S. Treasury Department has started turning over confidential banking records related to Hunter Biden in response to requests from Senate investigative committees. Let me skip you to this part here. Banks and financial institutions are required to file suspicious activity reports when they notice unusual transactions that could indicate illegal activities such as money laundering, terror financing, or fraud. A spokesperson for Johnson did not respond to requests for comment on Wednesday. Grassley and Johnson also requested Hunter Biden's official travel records from the U.S. Secret Service. And we talked about that in my video from yesterday, being Ron Johnson, not Don Johnson, but Ron Johnson and Chuck Grassley, who sent out this letter asking for these records. Now, keep in mind, this is interesting because this is going to the Secret Service. And if indeed it does show that Hunter Biden was using Air Force One or Air Force Two, keep in mind that this would likely have been known about by Obama. A spokesperson for Grassley said he could not elaborate on what the records contained at this time, but criticized Democrats for recklessly seeking to interfere with the investigation. As a matter of routine, we don't discuss sensitive third-party material during ongoing investigations. It's unfortunate that Democrats, whom we've kept in the loop on our investigations, would recklessly seek to interfere with legitimate government oversight. And that's essentially what's going on, right? And that's what Q's saying here. Read carefully, big development. This is a big development because this shows that we're likely going to end up talking to Hunter Biden one way or another. Keep in mind, this is big stuff. The bank seems to think it was suspicious, and of course Ukraine thought it was suspicious. And if indeed the Secret Service coughed something up that also looks suspicious, this will be big news. Senate is back to work. This whole acquittal thing is done. It's official. We're not going to talk about it much anymore. It's all done. Impeachment goal was to delay, and we knew this, right? This was all just to keep the Senate from getting back to work. They wanted this thing to, keep calling witnesses or keep doing whatever it was that they could do so that they could keep this pumped through the narrative and at least get through a successful Iowa caucus. That didn't happen. Will they try again? Likely. Accountability is coming. Q. Let's move on. 38:36, 16 minutes after the hour of 11. Think HRC, being Hillary Rodham Clinton, Russia reset statement. This was some years back, and if you'll remember, it was kind of an awkward statement and very curious, announcing that they were going to try and do some new business deals. Of course, one of them ended up being Uranium One, but she had this really weird kind of it was like a bro handshake kind of thing going on. I don't know what she was doing, but you can find it online. It was in this small office, and she was announcing that it was a big, fat do-over. Think Barack Hussein in the membrane Obama, who said literally, "I'll have more flexibility after the election." And we know this because it was a hot mic statement. We've seen it. And I think probably most of you have seen it. And if you've not seen it, you can easily see that online. These are things that are demonstrable, both the Russia reset statement and Barack Obama's statement. These were things that we already know of. And it was the same thing just like Joe Biden, right? We've already seen this on video, your connections to Russia and Ukraine. And that's what Q's pointing out here. Hot mic statement to Russian depot regarding Q to Hussein regarding Putin. Think Hussein White House refusal to send weapons to Ukraine. Yeah, they wanted missiles. They got blankets. Republican Congress pushed to assist, but instead sent only blankets. Think Democrats attack regarding POTUS for failure to protect Ukraine against Russian aggression. And I stated this pretty thoroughly in a couple of videos ago, but I was talking about the Schiff family, but in general, this kind of contingency within our Congress that has been working for many years. And I'm talking not just decades, I'm talking about this goes back hundreds of years. But really ever since the fall of the Soviet Union. I think is probably more relevant at this point. They've really been wanting to destabilize Russia using Ukraine as a proxy. Same thing with Iran, same thing with North Korea, same thing with China, and you could probably even toss Pakistan in there too. But this was another Soros venture. Soros is way wrapped up in Ukraine. Of course, that's because they welcome him there. They take his dirty money. What advanced weapons did POTUS send to Ukraine? Sent missiles, right? 2 + 2 = 6? No, I don't think it does. I'll get back to you. Define projection. Think 1.8 billion. Hussein, White House, Ukraine. Which bank? Well, that money went to Rosemont Seneca Partners LLC, right? And of course, we know already that about $166,000 per month were going to people like Devin Archer and Hunter Biden. Well, that's why this was going this way. So when people ask themselves, why were people like this who knew nothing about the energy industry, who knew nothing about the local language or culture, how they were getting this kind of coin, we find out here. Think U.S. aid to Ukraine. Think worldwide aid to Ukraine. Yeah, the rest of the world's not so generous unless you're counting people like those globalists, which they're really, really generous. And they'll put that money anywhere they can if they think it means destabilizing countries like Russia or, of course, America. Think Uranium One, sale of Uranium One to Russia. Lots of people benefited from that, right? Frank Justra and, of course, the Clintons. And then, of course, even Robert Mueller benefited from that, right? Interestingly enough, sold out U.S. to benefit Russia for personal financial gain, risked U.S. national security for personal financial gain. How was payment made to U.S. persons? Well, all sorts of donations to PACs, all sorts of payments to energy companies. Think Ukraine, think Iran, Russia and Iran allies, Russia, Iran, and China allies. Well, I don't think they'd love for you to know that, but they sure do a lot of things together, don't they? And, I want to point out that, again, we talk about Iran. And we talk about how there was all this corruption out there as far as, of course, their government and the JCPOA. And I really still think that although the nuclear weapon issue out there is an issue, they've always just used that to hold it over people's heads. It's sort of an extortion tactic, right? It's like, look, if you don't give us more money, we're going to have to pop one of these off. But what it's not talked about as much are the companies that moved into Iran. Volkswagen was a company that made a ton of coin off of black money in Iran. It basically became a black site where people could kind of go in and make as much money as they wanted without any kind of oversight because nobody was doing any auditing, which only contributes to why those pallets of cash were being sent over there and why they were in multiple denominations, because they were paying multiple kinds of people. Remember, Total SA was out there pumping their oil and doing whatever it was that they were doing. Green companies were out there. There were a ton of people making a ton of money out there in Iran. Meanwhile, you had the United States essentially protecting them on the outside, not allowed in. And that's what this whole thing is really about, or I shouldn't say the whole thing's about, but that kind of whole area is about. U.S. political corruption, China, U.S. political corruption, Ukraine, U.S. leverage on behalf of, well, who was on behalf of Ukraine? We had a point man, Joe Biden. U.S. political corruption, Russia. U.S. political corruption, Iran. So there's a theme here, and it's U.S. political corruption. Common denominator, China, Russia, Iran, closed financial systems, and that's the big thing, right? They weren't able to get their money back out of it, and these were closed financial systems. So places like China, Russia, and Iran are a great place to sponsor terrorism because there's not much we can do about it, right? Logical thinking, Q. Post 3837, 40 minutes after the hour of 11, bigger than you can imagine. And Q is really breaking down how this really goes super, super deep beyond the selling of state secrets, more than selling of U.S. security, more than selling of military tech, more than selling of CIA assets, more than selling of NSA bulk data collection programs, more than selling of uranium, more than selling of U.S. space national security programs and positions, more than selling of U.S. aids, more than selling of special access programs, classified 1 through 99. Okay, so all of these things are obviously huge, right? This is what kind of leads us to this sum of all fears kind of situation. And of course, many people were enriching themselves through all of this, but you've got to keep them loyal in one shape or form. And in order to do that, you have to have something much, much deeper that will buy and reward their silence, because money oftentimes will not do it. However, If you're a person that's, say, in DC that is benefiting from military tech or whatever it might be above, and they want to make sure that you get quiet, they got to make sure that they have something on you, something that you never want anyone to ever see the light of day, right? You don't ever want to have them maybe find a video of you with somebody who's maybe not of age. They don't want to have a video of you doing something horrible to somebody else, right? And that is where the extortion aspect of all this comes in, and people like Jeffrey Epstein kind of come in, right? Now, we've seen this classified 1 through 99 before, and every time I've seen it, it leads me to think that we're talking about human trafficking. And I'm just going to show you a couple quick examples. This is post 3396 from the 10th of July. And you can see it shows up a couple times there. And we're talking about RC, who is Rachel Chandler. And she was one of the hookup people for Jeffrey Epstein. They're talking about her age. We're not going to break down the whole post there. You can read it there. But we were talking about the Epstein plane, the FBI. We were talking about her age. We were talking about the island and the temple, witnesses, whatever it is, seems to be classified 1 through 99. And of course, that has to do with human trafficking. Now, let me take you to this one from the 11th of June, 2019. And we're not going to read this one either. You can pause the screen if you want, but we were talking about Hollywood. We were talking about what seems to be some sort of MK Ultra. If you'll notice down at the bottom of the post, the mindset of most, if the majority of people believe this, then this must be more true than that. And then again, CIA classified 1 through 99. And then we have like a section 56. So maybe section 56 of this 1 through 99 has to do with what sounds to be a CIA program, human, psychological, and emotional distress. And IIED is intentionally inflicted emotional distress. This is something that's been very, very commonly known to CIA, whether it's, back in the day, of course, it was called MK Ultra, Monarch, or whatever you want to call it nowadays. I'm sure it's changed many names, but you get the idea. And that's how many of these people are sort of essentially mind controlled. That's why they grow up on the farm. That's why everyone seems to be farm related. Now, keep in mind, back then, Q was posting CIA with the I. And then, of course, this post that we have now no longer has that I, which leads me to think that a lot of these intelligence assets no longer have their communication or their form of communication or whatever it is. But it seems like we're talking about some sort of human trafficking. And, of course, down here at this post, Q says crimes against humanity. Well, we've seen that before, right? This was implied that the Clinton Foundation was involved in crimes against humanity. Remember, they were knee deep in Haiti, where there was lots of human trafficking, right? Now, let me show you one more. This is post 3423 from the 12th of July, just the very next day from the one I just read you. Wheels Up. And Wheels Up was one of these private jet charters that Bill Clinton was using a lot. A lot of people were using them. Private jet, it was like an Uber for private jets, right? And they had flight logs too, just like the Epstein flight logs I just showed you. And again, we see the classified 1 through 99 under investigation by the FBI, DOJ. Well, I would imagine so. That's what so much of this is going to lead to. So while we're kind of drawing the public in with the crimes of Hunter Biden and all that, that's likely going to lead to something. But remember, so much of this is hinged on people's loyalty. And money doesn't usually just keep people loyal. As a matter of fact, it's usually quite the opposite. However, like I said, if you've got incriminating information on you, you're going to stay loyal for life, and you're going to go and do strange things. And that's why we're watching the Democratic Party melt down, because they know that, because there's likely something on them. And so they're willing to sell everyone out that they can, because if it ever comes out, you can never put it back in the bottle. So I hope you're understanding this. I think many of you are, but for those of you who are new to this, understand that this is likely to get much, much darker. We are talking about crimes against humanity. Remember what Jeffrey Epstein did, but also remember that he kept a safe full of all kinds of tapes or CDs or files or who knows what he had. But all of this had to do with having things on other people. And of course, that's why they were loyal. And if that stuff gets out, it will most certainly crush them. When you cannot defeat the United States of America by attacking head on, you change tactics and deploy a kill from within internal operations. So it kind of makes sense to what they're doing now, right? Why would they intentionally wreck their own country? Because it's going to distract from them. financial, economy, military, police, division of citizenry, border collapse. You get it, right? They want to tear this whole thing down because you'll miss their little crimes if we do in the process. Install like-minded leaders in key positions of U.S. government. Well, that was really key, right? And this sort of thing has gone on not just with the U.S. This has gone on all over the world since the end of time. So it's nothing real new, but it became very insidious. And then, of course, Q is talking about Iran here. How many people removed from the FBI had Iranian family backgrounds? Well, there's quite a few that could come to mind. And of course, this wasn't from the FBI, but think about Valerie Jarrett's father, who ran a hospital out there in Shiraz. But I would say most relevant at the moment, think about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. But in particular, Peter Strzok. Remember, Peter Strzok came from a very long line of knuckleheads. His father worked for Bell Helicopters. And the best from what I can tell, Bell Helicopters back in the day, like in the days of Vietnam, they had sort of their own little cost-plus action going on, very much like the company Halliburton was doing out in the Middle East, making all this coin by essentially just wrecking helicopters and wrecking tanks and wrecking their own trucks because they were going to make cost plus off of just ordering a new one. It was a huge racket. But either way, Peter Strzok's father and his uncle, they've been long wrapped up in the FBI and the CIA, and it's been for a long time, and definitely enriching themselves off of lots of things. Also, remember Peter Strzok's wife, just 24 hours, not even 24 hours after the police found Hillary Clinton's laptop and her emails, Peter Strzok's wife is promoted to Associate Director of the SEC. Also, remember that Peter Strzok's buddy was one Rudolph Contreras, and he was the one that took the plea deal from Michael Flynn. And of course, Peter Strzok himself was the one who was warned by the ICIG back in 2015 that those emails of Hillary's were getting out to China. And of course, he did nothing about it. So now that you have all that in picture, you can kind of understand how this all goes down, right? The silent war continues. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake, we're at war, and it is a full-scale war. It's just not going to be reported. The revolution will not be televised. Let's move on. Post 3838, that's 11:11. 4 minutes after the hour of 12, control over the media has kept people in the dark. Control over the media has kept people at heel, being behind. Control over the media has kept people focused on falsehoods. Control over the media has kept people in a constant state of fear. Control over the media has divided our republic into segments, being race, religion, class, political affiliation, gender, and they use all that in kind of a weaponized form, right? Yeah, I'm not much of a doom and gloomer myself. I know I get a lot of flack sometimes for my whether it's just injecting humor into my style of reporting or researching or whatever. And honestly, I don't really give a crap. I think that apathy is one of the most useless human emotions that exists. And I get that we all feel things, and I get that we all feel powerless, and that we all feel scared, and we all feel all kinds of things. But as far as I'm concerned, the time for outrage and fear and all that stuff, that was decades ago. And if you missed it, you're too late, and it's cool. But you got to pull yourself up by the bootstraps, even though AOC says you can't do that. And you got to toughen up, because we're at war. We're at real war. It's not a fake war. This isn't a social media war. This isn't a perceived war that you just tune in every once in a while and get to hear the details on. You're involved. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're being apathetic about it, it's not really going to help you. But that's exactly what they want you to do. And so that's why I think it's even more useless, because they'd love for you to just sit there and wait for Q to do something. They'd love for you to just sit there and get overwhelmed with that apathy and just assume that this is the way it's always going to be. But the fact of the matter is there's always something that we can do. And I'm not here to get on a soapbox or anything like that, but we can get involved locally. And we can make our township strong again. We can get involved in our schools. We can get involved in our, our local, whatever it is, our local charities, our local sports, our local whatever, and make our own neighborhoods better. And that is what's going to create good people that will go to Washington. And that's the only way we're going to do it. It's the organic way to do it. That's the way this whole thing works. That's how this was supposed to go down. And we've lost some of that. And because we've lost some of that, we need Q. And the sad thing is that we needed Q at all. So at the end of the day, we got ourselves in a big hole, but we can get ourselves out of it. When a citizenry is divided, they have no collective power, but that's not true. That's not true. Only when we're divided, we have no power. So if we're sitting there arguing about gender, political affiliation, class, religion, and race, which sometimes I do on Twitter, doesn't help us that much, right? The fact of the matter is unless we're actually spreading this knowledge or teaching people how to be more civic minded or whatever it is, there's always something that we can do that's going to make this better, because what we're seeing is that it is happening and the paradigm is shifting, and all we have to do is kind of contribute to it. All right, enough preaching. I don't know why I got all. When a citizenry has no collective power, they can no longer control the levers that govern them. Levers of control, the illusion of democracy. Yeah, democracy isn't a bad word, folks. It's a very, very cool thing. And when used correctly, it's a wonderful thing, and it may not be perfect, but it's the best thing that we've got, right? And the fact of the matter is that we are a democratic constitutional republic, and we have that ability to still speak for ourselves, and we haven't had our voice completely taken away. We have a lot of tech companies that are really, really working hard at doing that, but the fact of the matter is it's not gone yet, so we might want to use it. Anyway, I don't know why I'm preaching. Let's move on. Post 3839, 19 minutes after the hour of 12. Get a Twitter status. Q says it's time to wake up. Grab a brush, put on a little makeup. Takes you to Benny Johnson, who posts this video from Tucker Carlson, and he's talking about the New Way Forward Act. Now, this is about a 9-minute video, and actually Tucker explains this really, really well. And so I'm going to actually leave you with this because, oddly enough, this kind of contributes to the preaching that I just did, even though I don't usually like to preach. But that's exactly what I'm talking about, getting involved and knowing what some of this legislation really, really is so that we can be involved in our own communities. So I'm going to leave you with this video, and on that, these are the Q posts, at least for now. I'm assuming since these are late posts that we may get some more, so I may be seeing you very soon. All my alternate links are down below, and I'm going to leave you with Tucker. Until next time, Patriots, stay focused.
At this moment, there's a bill pending in the Congress called the New Way Forward Act. It's received almost no publicity, and that's unfortunate, as well as revealing. The legislation is sponsored by 44 House Democrats, including Ilhan Omar and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. It's roughly 4,400 words long. That means it's almost exactly as long as the U.S. Constitution. Like the Constitution, it's designed to create a whole new country. The bill would entirely remake our immigration system with the explicit purpose of ensuring that criminals are able to move to the United States and settle here permanently with immunity. Now, you may think we're exaggerating for effect, but we're not exaggerating, not even a little bit. The New Way Forward Act is the single most radical piece of legislation we have ever seen proposed in this country, ever. It makes the Green New Deal look like the status quo. A document produced by Democrats to promote the bill says this, and we're quoting it verbatim: "Convictions should not lead to deportation," end quote. Now, keep in mind, we're not talking about convictions for double parking or even for DUI. The bill targets felony convictions, serious crimes that could send you to prison for years, and should. A press release from Congressman Jesus Garcia of Illinois is explicit about this. Garcia brags that the bill will break the, quote, prison to deportation pipeline, something most of us were for. So how does the bill do that? Well, under current U.S. law, legal U.S. immigrants can be deported if they commit a, quote, aggravated felony or a crime of moral turpitude. That is a vile, depraved act like molesting children. Under the New Way Forward Act, crimes of moral turpitude are eliminated entirely as a justification for deportation. And the category of aggravated felony gets eliminated too. So what does that mean? Consider this. Under current law, immigrants who commit serious crimes, robbery to fraud to child sexual abuse, must be deported regardless of the sentences they receive. Other crimes, less severe ones like racketeering, require deportation if the perpetrator receives at least a 1-year sentence. Under this bill, there would no longer be any crime that automatically requires deportation, none. And one crime, falsifying a passport, would be made immune from deportation no matter what, because apparently 9/11 never even happened, and we no longer care about fake government documents. By the way, if you just renewed your driver's license to comply with the Real ID Act, you must feel like an idiot, because immigrants are getting a pass, you're not. Under the proposed legislation, for crimes that would still allow deportation, the required prison sentence would rise from 1 year to 5 years. We checked the Bureau of Justice statistics. According to federal data, crimes like car theft, fraud, and weapons offenses all carry average prison sentences of fewer than 5 years. And that's just looking at averages. There are people who commit rape, child abuse, even manslaughter, and get sentences with fewer than 5 years. Lots of them, actually. If the New Way Forward Act passes, immigrants who commit those crimes and receive those sentences would remain in this country, and of course, they will be eligible for citizenship day one, too, of course. But even that is understating the law's effect. Even a 5-year prison sentence wouldn't necessarily be enough to trigger deportation. The bill would grant sweeping new powers to immigration judges, allowing them to nullify a deportation order. The only requirement for that is, quote, the immigration judge finds such an exercise of discretion appropriate in pursuant of humanitarian purposes, to assure family unity, or when it is otherwise in the public interest. Talk about open-ended. In other words, anti-American immigration judges, and there are a lot of those in this country, would have a blank check to open the borders. You would not be voting on this. It would happen anyway. Is this shocking you yet? Because we're just getting started. We read this proposed legislation. Here's another point. Current U.S. law makes drug addiction grounds for deportation because why wouldn't it? This bill would eliminate that statute. Current law also states that those who have committed drug crimes abroad or, quote, any crimes involving moral turpitude are ineligible to immigrate here. The New Way Forward Act abolishes that statute. So a Mexican drug cartel leader could be released from prison, then freely come to America immediately. And if he wants, he could come here illegally, and it still wouldn't be a crime because, and you were waiting for this part, the bill also decriminalizes illegal entry into America, even by those we've previously deported. In other words, you break our law, we send you out, you come back, you break it again, you can stay. According to a document promoting this bill, criminalizing illegal entry into America is, quote, white supremacist. That's a quote, white supremacist. Now, by this point, you're beginning to wonder, are we making this up? We're not making it up. In fact, we're barely halfway through the bill. The legislation doesn't just make it harder to deport illegal immigrants who commit crimes. It doesn't just make it easier for criminals to move here illegally, though it does both. The bill would also effectively abolish all existing enforcement against illegal immigration. To detain illegal immigrants, ICE would have to prove in court that they are dangerous or a flight risk. But of course, ICE wouldn't be allowed to use a detainee's prior criminal behavior as proof of danger. That's banned. ICE would have to overcome even more hurdles if the detainee claims to be gay or transgendered. If they're under 21 or if they can't speak English and an interpreter isn't immediately available, they get a pass. In other words, it would be much harder to arrest an illegal alien in this country than it is to arrest you. They're the protected class here. You're just some loser who's paying for it all. But believe it or not, we saved the nuttiest part of this legislation for last, and here's what it is. What could be more destructive than changing U.S. law specifically to allow rapists, child molesters, and drug dealers to stay in America? How about this? Using taxpayer money to bring deported criminals back into America. That's right. This bill would not only abolish your right to control who lives in your country, but it invents a brand new right, quote, the right to come home. It orders the government to create a, quote, pathway for those previously deported to apply to return to their homes and families in the United States, as long as they would have been eligible to stay under the new law. It's retroactive, in other words. DHS must spend taxpayer dollars transporting convicted criminal illegal aliens back into the United States. Not making this up. So who would be eligible for these flights? Tens of thousands of people we kicked out of this country for all kinds of crimes. Sexual abuse, robbery, assault, drug trafficking, weapons trafficking, human trafficking. From 2002 to 2018, 480,000 people were deported for illegal entry or re-entry into America. And under this bill, you'd have to buy each of them a plane ticket to come home. Those tickets alone would cost about $1 billion. And that's before Democrats make you start paying for these criminals free health care, too, which they plan to do and have said so. The New Way Forward Act fundamentally inverts every assumption you have about this country. Under this legislation, the criminals are now the victims. Law enforcement is illegitimate. It's racist, just like the country you live in, just like you are. And the only solution is to get rid of both. America would be better off as a borderless rest stop for the world's predators and parasites. That's the point of this. And we're not overstating. Go read it. This is a big deal. This is not a small thing. This is not renaming a post office. It's hard to believe any American would put these ideas on paper, much less try to pass them into law. And yet, remarkably, that's happening. And even more remarkably, the press has ignored it. This isn't happening in secret. It's happening in the House of Representatives. Scores of Democrats have backed this bill. But the legislation has not been mentioned in the New York Times. It hasn't been mentioned on CNN, a news channel, or even in self-described conservative outlets like National Review. No mention. Consider if this were working the other way. If a lone, I don't know, Republican state legislator from Minot, North Dakota had proposed a bill this extreme that would remake America completely, the president himself would be expected to answer for it. CNN would demand that he disavow it, even if he'd never heard of it before. But when 1/5 of the entire Democratic caucus backs a bill demanding that you import illegal alien felons and then pay for it, it's a non-event in the American media. They don't think you should know about it. And that's dangerous, if we're being honest. Whether the press cares or not, these are the stakes of the 2020 election, and you have a right to know what they are. A growing wing of the Democratic Party views America itself as essentially illegitimate, a rogue state in which everything must be destroyed and remade. Our laws, our institutions, our customs, our freedoms, our history, our values. And of course, that's the point of all of this. An entirely new country in which resistance is crushed and they're in charge forever.